before we get started. So, Miss Zoom shared with us that we are officially live with Ali, co-founder of Jane App, who has quickly become, over the past year, one of these people who, when I get FaceTime with Ali, I just get excited. Really, your whole team does that for me, but I think that you're kind of the icing on the cake, Ali.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm just gonna say it again.
I feel the same way.
Thank
I'm like,
you.
oh, I had a call with Dr. Jodi this morning.
It's fun. It's fun. We could go on and on forever. And if you guys aren't already aware of Jane and the possibilities that the Jane App program and the Jane App team put in front of wellness practitioners, the list is long. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to borrow some of Ali's time this morning and just hear about how she lives in a world with lots of responsibilities, lots of hats being worn, how the vision of Jane happened, how she went for it and leaned in and listened to it, and how now bringing it to today, how balance happens within that picture. And all too often, wellness practitioners have this story about how they have to stay in this box of just doing what they went to trade school to do or graduate school to do. And I'm constantly pushing my people to think outside the box and create multiple streams of income and really get the vision and then go after it. So Ali, please introduce yourself.
Hi. I know, I was like, oh, that's such a great vision that you've cast for today. Okay, so I'm Ali, co-founder and co-CEO of Jane. I'll mention I started, my parents are both physiotherapists, so I actually started in clinic life, just growing up there, doing the filing and that whole world. And then I did reception and took over management. And then and I was managing clinics while I went to school, and then ended up opening my own clinic in 2011. That's a multidisciplinary practice. So that's physio, chiro, massage, midwives, counseling, dietitians, like very multidisciplinary. It's called Canopy. And so,
I love that. I didn't know that. That's beautiful.
Oh, really? Yeah, there was a lot of that was three naming exercises in, we found Canopy, the idea that it was an overarching care center that anyway, so it's very natural, bring the outside in. Naming things is really fun, as we were just talking about Jane's name earlier this morning. And so I opened a practice in 2011, managed and ran that. And as part of the opening of the practice, I needed software. In 2011, nothing was really available, especially nothing online, and nothing that was multidisciplinary either, nothing that would work for all of my different practitioner types. So online booking was a must. I knew that I was also pregnant with my third child at the time. So I knew that for myself, I could only ever get to booking appointments at the end of the day. And I was asking brand new practitioners to come into my space and build a practice. And I knew it needed to be really easy for patients to book it. And I also needed electronic charting. People underestimate the cost of paper charting. And one of the costs is actually where you store them. And I needed more income generating treatment space. So I knew I couldn't have like just a big wall of stored charts and then have a place to store them and shred them and photocopying. And they're ridiculously expensive, not to mention bad for the environment. And so electronic charting was a must. So I started looking around while I was building out the physical clinic, and just couldn't find anything that would work. And there, especially back then, there was just really no options. And so I talked to Trevor, who's now a co-founder of Jane, and he was building my website at the time and branding the practice. And he just listened to me complain, and I complained loudly. So I'll say complaining loudly about your problems is like actually a way to get help. So just tell everyone you know about every problem you have, and someone will be like, oh yeah, I can help with that, which is kind of magic. So he was like, let's just build it into your website. So the original version of Jane was just electronic charting and online booking. It was built right into my website. I hosted it in my clinic on a Mac Mini. And then all our practitioners, we all just used it for a year and a half to run Canopy. So that was like the origin story. And I think solving your own problems, or solving problems you have in your clinic, solving problems for your patients. I know one of the things you were talking about is kind of side hustles, or how do you bring in new streams of revenue? And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that just are like, I'm an entrepreneur and I want to go and start a business, but don't even know what business they want to start. And that's one style of going off and starting something new. But just paying attention to problems that that need solving and solving them for yourself. If often what happens, we've seen in many different startups actually out there, is that you're always solving problems that other people have too. And so starting with just like looking in your own life and like your own practice and your own patients and thinking, what could be better here? I think it's a great way to start a side business. And something even as simple as like, oh, my patients, I'm actually really obsessed with courses right now, which you are a master of, but how can we bring those programs into people's practice where it's one-to-many, where it's repeatable? It's called evergreen content, when it's something that you make once, but you can sell over and over and over again, but still provides great value for your patients. And also it's distributed. One of the limitations of, I could talk for a long time and I should stop because we were supposed
I love it. I'm like taking notes in my head.
I know, I'm like, it's distributed. So one of the cool things about technology and has provided practitioners is it used to be that you were very limited to your geography. Like you can only treat people within probably like, what do you think, 10 kilometer radius? Like people don't travel that far for care unless you're super specialized or you're the only one around. But I find manual therapy tends to be quite there's a boundary to the geography of how far people will go, which is great. You build deep connections to your community, and there's so much benefit to that. And I think it's an incredible role that practitioners can play in their community. But you can also be untethered if you think broader about all the things that are available through online content delivery and even online care in different ways, classes and cohorts and challenges and health, just anything that's kind of related in the healthcare space. So I'm working on tooling actually for that, because I love the idea of more revenue streams for practitioners. It's one of the things that I would love to build more into Jane. So not only things like programs, but also things like how do you create chart templates you can monetize, or like how can we build things into Jane where you can monetize that as a practitioner and have a secondary revenue stream. Love it. I'm like, we're totally aligned on that. Yeah. And so the tool is available for that. And there's lots of tools out there that provide those online courses that you could use. Thinkific is one that's here in Vancouver. And there's one called Kajabi or something. I should find it and we can link them. What do you use for your courses?
We partner with a company called Attractwell, and they're really wonderful people. They're a family-owned company, and they're like Jane in that when you call for support, it's like they're excited to talk to you. And I love working with them. So our entire school, Staffless Practice Academy, is in Attractwell, and all of the freebies that you guys get from us are Attractwell products. So I just want to spin off of what you just said. So, what I'm hearing you say is if there's a problem and you can create a solution to it, and the solution really works well, we have to then think that you can't be the only person who had that problem / potential. So how do you know, and this is kind of going away from what we planned on asking about, but how do you know when it's good? Like for the wellness practitioners who are thinking, I've got this thing sitting there and I know that it could be good. How do you know if it's something to lean into or if it's something to say that's just not the best use of my time?
Yeah. In my story and in Jane's story, we've always been pulled into markets, and that's been I think it's probably not a totally normal story, but because Jane was visible, well, not Jane, but the booking software was visible for Canopy. I had practices emailing me and saying, what are you using? Like they could just see my online booking. So they're like, what is this? And then Trevor's company's name was at the bottom of my website, like Built By. And so he had the same. So I think it was probably only 6 or 7 people that were like, hey, I want to use this. And we're like, well, that's enough, like market research. But now we do some, like when we're deciding what markets to try and build for, or where we should grow Jane, we do more specific market research where you could go out and ask friends, like your colleague circle, especially if it's something to do with healthcare, like, hey, would this be helpful to you? Or if you've built it and you're using it, you can run sort of betas where you just say, hey, could you try this program out and let me know your feedback? And then that's kind of a way to improve and ensure that it's working for other people and not just for yourself. But all these things do take time. And I know people are always like, when the heck am I supposed to do anything of
Time? I don't have time. I want this now.
I know it's like everyone, it's so tricky to find time. And then the other thing is like a feeling of the unknown. We were talking about the ability of people to try something new and think broader than just practicing as like, this is what I learned how to do, and this is what I'm here to do. And I always think that people often fear the unknown, and like knowledge they don't have seems very difficult to obtain. And knowledge you do have, you often underestimate the value of. And I see this in practitioners actually all the time, and that they undervalue their service because they're like, well, obviously, like I just know this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but your patients don't know this stuff. Like you are the expert, and sharing that knowledge and being very like prescriptive about their treatment plans. And like, that's what people want because you have more knowledge than them. But I think a lot of people, as soon as you own the knowledge, it's undervalued in it. Mm-hmm. And any knowledge you don't have is overvalued and also seems more complicated than it really is. And so just taking small steps to educate yourself can, I think, also decrease the fear. So I'm growing a company that I've never grown before. So our company is a different company every day. It's new challenges every day that we've never encountered, but people are very generous with their time. So finding people that have done it and saying like, hey, would you be interested in just having like a coffee and just, this is an idea I have, I'd love to get your feedback, is also incredibly powerful. If you think I want to start this program, and there's others kind of similar ones in different fields, or maybe like that's not an overlapping like competitive program, reaching out. I don't know if people are on LinkedIn, but especially if it's a technical program, you can just message people and they're very generous with their time and their advice and their feedback. And then of course, podcasts and courses and finding people that have different outlooks. So powerful, and just educating yourself, and it reduces the fear of the unknown.
I think we have a tendency to get into the shiny object syndrome where we're like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do that. And what I'm hearing you say is being consistent and finding an avenue where you're building with curiosity and following up with it consistently. And I certainly am in full agreement of that. So I want to hear a little bit more about you. How would your best friend describe you? What would they say about you?
That's a really difficult question. I don't know. Probably stubborn and passionate, but also hopefully kind.
Are you an Aries?
No, I'm a Leo.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks. 41.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm in my last year in my 40s.
Oh, so I turned 40 and I started saying I was in my 40s, and my daughter was like, Mom, you're 40. You're not in your 40s.
You're totally in your
40s. So now at 41, I'm officially allowed to say I'm in my 40s.
You're in your 40s.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Stubborn, kind.
Passionate. Yeah. I think my children would say I'm brave and smart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. I love having kids.
They're hot topic down here.
Right now. Well, mine are 14, 13, and 11. It's just such a great age.
Awesome. So how do you keep balance? How do you, that was another question I wanted to hone in on, is when you've got this huge project like Jane App, and you've got kids and you've got your 40s and you've got all of these things to balance. How do you do it? What are your go-tos?
I know I try to avoid the word balance. I don't think anything's ever really in balance, because balance implies that things are even, and that's just not how life works. So I say to my kids, I'm like, I feel like I need 4 entire lives. Like I need one life just to spend all my time thinking about my kids, and one life to think about my business, and one life to make my like maintenance, just make sure my house is clean. And then one life to be active and exercise. And like this whole self-care movement always drives me up the wall. I'm like, I don't have time for self-care. Now it's just one more thing I'm failing at fitting into my life. Are you saying, no, I can't go to the spa today? I'm like, I have 3 children and a house and a business. I'm like, there's too much going on. But I think it comes in, I like to think more about like harmony. So when you think about maybe if you're listening to music, nothing's happening all the same all the time. Like sometimes some things are louder and sometimes some things are quieter. And some songs, like for certain periods of the music, are playing it all. And you're just like, we'll get back to that. And there's beauty in that, in having a life that has like just, it's not balance. Maybe balance over the very long term of your entire life, but that's a very long time. I think people think that there should be balance like on a weekly increment or something. I'm like, that's just not necessarily the way it works. So I just set my life up in a way where I try to have harmony. So my kids are at an age where they just want to hang out with their friends. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to take you away from this life twice a year. And we know. So we have these like 2 set vacations we've done for 5 years now. We go away and I spend this very intentional time together. They look forward to it. We know what we're going to do. We plan it in advance and we have like amazing, great connection time. And then I actually recently heard for teenagers, I listen to a lot of parenting podcasts. My youngest has ADHD. Highly recommend ADHD parenting podcasts, not just actually for parenting, but for business as well. Teaches you a lot about how to communicate with people, how to deal with emotion, because ADHD kids tend to have high emotion. But one of the things that I learned in that podcast, they just said, and I think this is true for business too, they're like, you don't actually have to spend, like the stress on people to spend like hours of quality time with your kids, it's so high. I'm like, they said, if you do 15 minutes of one-on-one time doing something that they like to do, that's like literally all you need to do. So if my kid's sitting down playing, like scrolling through TikTok or playing a video game, like I literally just went and sat with my son, my 13-year-old, and I just sat there and we just chatted and talked about whatever he was looking at for 15 minutes. And I'm like, that was a great little 15-minute moment. I can fit that into my day. And we had, instead of like this huge pressure to do some huge family outing where everyone hates it and doesn't want to be there and they want to be with their friends. So it's about like, what is the goal you're actually trying to achieve? And the same can be true in business. You spend 15 minutes of time on something that's really intentional. It can just create a bigger outcome than you think, I think. So even like with your team, spending 15 minutes of intentional time, or with building like you can build relationships in small increments. And that's true across business and family.
I love that. I love that 15-minute thought. My mentor, Sue Brown, would teach, we would be specifically talking about chiropractic and how to listen to the body. And she would say, when you listen to an orchestra at any given time, you can tune into the drums, you can tune into the guitar, you can tune into the piano, you can tune into how the drums and the piano are bouncing with each other. And then you can step out and tune into the whole orchestra together. And all of those things are happening the whole time. It's just, where is your intention? And that is a huge piece.
Totally.
Balance is, where is your intention? And then having the ability to catch yourself when your intention is off, when you're misdirecting your attachments or my attachments. And that's why I ask about self-care. I love hearing like what people's regimens are. Like one of your regimens is spending real 15-minute increments with your kids, like intentionally. And I find that the people who really have what I want in the world, who are doing it and crushing it and have joy about themselves, they have these things that they do, that they implement. And I love learning about what they are. That would be a really cool book, actually.
Just a compilation of all these
Yeah.
tips. I used to do that when my kids were little. I mean, I've done this in every part of my life. I had 3 little kids. And if I found a family that had adult children, and that the adult children liked each other and the family seemed like cohesive, I'd be like, what did you do? Like, how did you get through their lives and become adults where you all got along and your kids like each other and you spend, and then they would just give me whatever they thought. And then I would say, okay, knowing my family, knowing my life, like what of this can I do and what can't I do? And I think that's the other thing too, is recognizing what's right for someone else is not going to be right for you. You have to take all the information and you have to decide like what works for you. Maybe sitting and talking to your kid about TikTok sounds like the worst thing ever. And it would make you like, you were like, I hate TikTok. And every time I see those stupid videos, I want to kill someone. I'm like, fine, don't do that. But find, a different thing to do for 15 minutes. And it's taking the advice and just like modifying it enough for your life and recognizing that it's easy for people to give advice that's very like, sounds very like there's no magic bullets. Everyone's like, 3 easy ways to do this. I'm like, no, that doesn't exist. Like you have to figure it out for your specific life. There's not going to be 3 easy things that work for every single person in the same way. Our lives are so unique and different.
But having the resources to know where to look to find what resonates, or, I always say, I just went on a book tour and I talked to a lot of students and I said to them, find the chiropractors. I was in chiropractic schools. Find the chiropractors who are teaching here, who are in practice, who just have like an extra spring in their step, and go get under their care. Go study, watch what they do, not necessarily what they say, but what they do. But even more importantly, find the chiropractors who teach here who just seem miserable, and go watch them do what they do. Learn from what they're doing and learn from what the Tiggers are doing, because they're both really important teachers.
The Tiggers and the Eeyores.
Yeah, the Tiggers. And I love Eeyore.
I love Eeyore too. Sometimes I'm like, I am just grumpy today. And it's kind of like you can revel in that.
I suck right now and it's totally cool. Where do I want to go from here? How do you know you need help? Because we're talking to wellness. The theme of this specific community is these are people who are serving their community wellness care, meaning intention behind what they do. They have a passion for what they do, and they either want no staff or they want to have a practice whose staff only does what they're really good at doing, as opposed to hiring Barb to sit behind your desk to play cards and mahjong and file and sit on her phone. So how do you know, with that being said, when you need help, and how do you ask for it? How do you know who to give what to? Tell me about what your help picture looks like.
Yeah, in my personal life, I think I'm extremely bad at asking for help. So I'm not sure that I'm the one to be giving advice on that personally. Like I want to do it all myself. I have a very strong independent streak that probably limits me from asking for enough help in my personal life. But in the business world, I ask for help constantly. And I think it's helpful to come from a place of just saying, I've never done this before, therefore I need more knowledge. And there's lots of people who have done it before. And maybe in your personal life, it's just a different, anyway, I'm trying to unpack my own baggage. I'm like, why can't I ask for help? I'm having a therapy session. Anyway, but in your business world and in your business life, anytime you're doing something for the first time, asking for help actually is super empowering, because I'm just about to start with an executive coach, which I've never done before. But the idea of just like wanting to be better, it requires asking other people for help. You're not going to magically learn and grow without it. And I think anyone who's here is obviously already committed to that. You're here, you're seeking out knowledge, you're seeking out a community, you're seeking out help. So I think the mindset of this whole group is probably already just bang on. Yeah.
Yeah. I have 2 coaches, one for this and one for that. And to have somebody help me figure out, I always say I'm not a coach, I'm a strategist, because I don't like to tell people what to do. I like to figure out together and then hold them accountable for doing what they committed to. And I think it's so important that we have those avenues of support, right?
Yeah, definitely. And for staffing, I have a lot of opinions on front desk staff, and I have a lot of opinions on what makes front desk staff great and what makes front desk staff fail, and the bar that front desk staff should be held to, but also the benefits of amazing admin staff. Like I have seen it firsthand, and I think it's almost like support at Jane. I value support at Jane as an income generator. I think the high quality of support we provide, we do 3 months of training. It's hard. We fail people from training. You can't, lots of people don't graduate. And so you have to get through this really intense training. And then once you're there, there's a standard that you're required to uphold. And it's not just answering questions, it's actually being helpful, which is different. So saying yes or no to a question is different from actually being helpful. So we talk about that and we train that, and it's humanizing Jane. So, and I think this is actually, all these pillars I'm going to give you that we talk about in our support team are very valid for if you're bringing on an admin staff. You could train them in the same way. We're going to have a session at Allied actually where we're going to talk about the training we do for support and how it could help with training admin staff and a program you might be able to put together. But okay, so first pillar is question answering. So yes, you have to be correct, you have to be fast, but you also have to be actually helpful. So what does that look like? The second pillar is humanizing. So when people call us, when they walk in your door, they're walking in a company's door. And a little bit different if you're a solo practitioner, depending on your location, but Canopy is just it's a clinic. And until they interact with humans, it's a business. And when they start interacting with humans, now this is a human to human interaction. And for us as a software company, our support people are the only humans they get to talk to. So that was super hard for me. I was the human for years, like on the phone and and so suddenly to give that responsibility to someone else is really difficult, and probably true for practitioners too. If you consider your admin staff as a continuation of care, what bar do you need to set for that? What bar do you set for the care you provide? That's the same bar you need to set for your admin staff. And they need to be considered as part of that. Like that's part of your care and part of your team. And I think if you can consider your front desk staff as integral to your patient care in the same way that the treatment is, you'll just look at it in a totally different view. Like it just looks different. So that's like just a mind shift. And if you don't want to like managing people is a very different experience. And I understand if people are like, I just don't want to manage people. So, but you do lose that. A part of your patient care gets lost. If you're, I just want to practice, then what happens when they walk out that door and you have your next patient that needs to come in? Are you going to put a buffer to do the like human care part now with the admin work? Or are you I know you have virtual assistants that help with that. Or how do you even word things in your software? And of course, I will say, Jane, how do you word things in a very friendly human way in everything you send out? You can do it with robots, but if you put your human touch into the way that you've worded things, and I'm actually an English major and a psych minor, and
I'm an English major too.
Yeah, I love it. And I think super carefully about the wording of everything. I mean, my poor team, they send me stuff and I'll edit it 1,000 times. I'm like, I don't like that word. Like that word brings like this kind of feeling, and we want to bring this kind of feeling. And so those little things, if you even just did a day editing, in Jane, there's an area where you can edit. It's customized language from almost everywhere in the app. And just go through and think about like, how would it feel to get this email after you've been treated? And how could I make this sound friendlier and create more like a relationship? So yeah, I think it's fascinating. You can do both. I think administrators that are great administrators are bringing income to your practice. They know how to fit people in. They know how to get people rebooked. They know how to pull their appointments even forward a week. Like someone cancels or says, oh, I'm just going to not book right now, I'll book later. Or someone walks in and says, I don't know when I'm supposed to be seen again. Like there's work that they do there that does create revenue. It's just kind of difficult to understand until you've worked with a really amazing one.
Mm. So what's the biggest mistake you see people make when it comes to bringing on front desk staff?
So one is people are scared to switch front desk staff because they've given up control of access to everything. So like if you have a manager and they're like, I'm setting up usernames and passwords for all your stuff and I'm doing all of these things, now you're kind of stuck because you're like, if this person leaves, or I think people feel disempowered. So they think, I don't know. Now it's that problem of the unknown knowledge is the scary knowledge. And it feels like I'm never going to be able to figure that out. And so now I'm just stuck with this, even though it's not great. And so the kind of remedy, there's two remedies for that. One is, I would really recommend using a password manager. And a password manager allows you to set up username and passwords. We use 1Password at Jane. It's a great Canadian company. I'll totally plug them. And what happens is you can remove or add people to what they're called vaults. And so you keep control of all of your username and passwords, of all of that information, and instead of just having someone log into everything and you just don't even know, you don't have control of that. And then the other thing is they don't document their training or any of the processes. And I understand that documenting stuff sucks. Like, and it also feels pointless. You're like, why am I documenting all this for one person? And so I always recommend the next time you have staff turnover, make it part of training. And I don't know if you have that same recommendation, but while the next person's getting trained, use that opportunity to say, okay, document it. And at Jane, we use a product called Notion as it's like where all of our internal docs are stored. It's a pretty flexible product, but you can just use like Google Drive, or I know a lot of people like to have physical binders, which is fine. But you just have to, they're harder to update when things change.
We have a whole SOP program. It's so good. It's
Yeah.
on Trello.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we teach people, as we actually have a whole hiring guide inside of Staffless Practice Academy. And one of the things is building out your SOP as you're training your new members, because, you know, people think that staffless practice means no staff. It's less staff doing things that they're not great at doing.
Yeah.
So it's focused, intentional work or play for each member of your team. So for example, if I talk to Alex and Alex's specialty is training people to get really good at Jane, but I'm asking him about the fees of Jane, or I'm asking him about the software program on the back end, it's not the best use of her time. What Alex would say to me is, Jodi, I love these questions, but you want to talk to this person, right?
Mhm.
Or if Ashley with marketing or whatever it might be. So having a special roles for the practice, a marketing person, a money person, a
Okay.
practice
Yeah.
doula, where their only job is to be the warm chocolate chip cookie walking in for all the people walking in. They are the person who makes everybody comfortable, including you. And people say, well, how do I know when to hire, and how do I know what to do with them when I do? And the role's already written out, because the last person you hired wrote all of it and did videos for all of it. So
Yeah,
100%.
that's awesome. I love that. I love that tip. That's funny. I've been thinking a lot about, I haven't really thought about that in practice, in a small practice. So do you recommend people just hire part-timers or contractors, or because that's like probably more staff than most people can
Yeah,
afford?
so I recommend that people look at, the first question we get is, how do you know what can be automated? And my answer to it is, what do you do over and over? And what do you say over and over that really doesn't require a human being to do
Yeah,
or say,
exactly.
but that automating it won't lose the personal experience that people want, because that is so
Exactly.
important.
Yeah.
And then there are going to be things that can be automated, like the tour of the office or what to do with payments. And then there are things that really need a human being, like sitting knee to knee, heart to heart, going through the health history.
Mhm.
So then you hire based on, if you need somebody who's going to do your QuickBooks and your invoicing and insurance, if that's something that you do, you have to hire a money person. You have to hire
Right.
somebody who, that's what they do all day long. That's what their training is in. They know so much about billing, insurance, and doing the money stuff that they could teach you how to do it, because
Mhm.
then they're coming with their expertise. And you can do that for every single role that the practice needs. And, you know, Allie, more than anything, we work with boutique practices where they're seeing between like 80 and 200 people a week. That's really
Yeah.
the niche for us.
Oh,
I
perfect.
have some one-on-one clients where they have 7 team members and 3 doctors, and they'll bring me on to work with their team members to streamline what they're doing, because so much time gets wasted.
Oh,
And then
totally.
I'm just going to say this one other thing, because I'm kind of fired up today. We're searching for a practitioner for our family, and I won't go into detail, but I spent an hour yesterday in a consult. This girl talked so fast, and I talk pretty fast. I had to ask her 3 times to slow down.
Yeah.
At the end of the call, it ended up being a $12,000 ticket to hire this health team to take care of a member of my family. And I felt completely unseen, completely unheard. So many details were dropped. I
Yeah.
think it's super, super important to keep the bird's eye view, keep the view of all of the moving pieces. And again, going back to Jane, that's one of the things I love about you guys. You keep the perspective of the new practitioner who doesn't know what to do. They don't know where to start. And you've got the written stuff, you've got the trainings, you've got the team that'll answer you got all the pieces. And that's why I love you guys.
Well, yeah, and I mean, different scale looks different. So I do think that's interesting hearing the size of practice you're working with. That does make a lot of sense. And then what does that look like? It's a hard thing to do when you're a solo, to bring on help when it's like everything's limited. There's only so much money to pay staff. I literally just had this conversation with my entire team actually, because at Jane, we grow on revenue the exact same way small business does. So I'm like, we can only hire more people if we make more money. And so we're just talking about how that works, because every department at Jane wants more people. Like we have just over 300 people. And like every team is like, I want more people. We've got so much work to do. We're so excited about what we're doing. And I'm like, the reason why we all work hard, and we work hard at Jane, is because we can't hire more people until we make more money, which means we have to get more customers in order to do more things. And so it's like a real order of operations. And so you kind of have to figure out like, what are your constraints based on budget and time, and then figure out a solution for all of those. Like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And then what's the best solution within your constraints? And so I like thinking about those at different levels, because there's always a million right ways to do something. There's always answers of like how you can improve. How can I make this a little bit better? And when you're in a small business, you can just take small steps. Like even like you just said, humanizing language on your automation, easy. You can do that. Doesn't cost anything, but it's going to create a different experience with your patient. And then you're a little bit of bigger practice. Okay, I can afford to hire this. And just taking small steps. Sometimes people try to take a solution for a clinic that's at a different size and try to implement.
Right.
And you got to pare it down and then take small iterative steps as you grow and scale as a business.
We talk a lot about figuring out who your perfect practice member is. It's actually when people join this group, it's one of the free things that we give them. And usually your perfect practice member is you 3 to 5 years ago, because you've already figured out their struggles and how to move through them. And if you look around your office and you look at the people on your schedule and the people who you are like stoked to see that day, they're usually a lot like you, and they're usually moving through things that you've already figured out. So then we narrow down, like, what words do they love? What words do they hate? What colors do they love? What colors do they hate? And we even teach people, one of the things that we do is they'll get a Jane app account and we'll build it for them. We'll put all of the pieces together. We'll take their brand kit, we'll apply it to Jane. And even the colors of their Jane app account can be branded so that it speaks to the person who's logging into the program, which is again if I have a blue collar, construction worker visiting my site and I've got pinks and purples all over the place, here we go, Allie, not to say that construction workers don't like pink and purple. I'm not saying that, you guys. I'm saying you match the loves and you try to get in the body of your perfect practice member and create excellence for them, including the words that they want to hear when they listen to your voicemail message. Like all of it counts. So I'm going to do a recap. I took some notes. Untethered, being pulled, balance with knowledge, avoid balance, 4 lives, harmony, parenting podcast, ADHD parenting podcast, 15-minute moments, that makes me want to cry, independent streak, humility versus empowerment, standard to uphold, saying yes and no is different from being helpful, fast, correct, humanizing, your staff being the door to your company, front desk staff as an integral part of care, words bring feelings, unknown knowledge equals scary knowledge, and I can't read that one. Anything else that you want to share or add?
No, I know we talked a lot about you hoping to inspire people to try new things. And I did just want to mention that I do feel a strong part of my story has been just doing a risk assessment. What's the worst thing that could happen? And then making sure that whatever step I'm taking, I'm comfortable that the worst thing that could happen is not something I can't handle. and then just trying things and saying yes. And so always just going for it, even though it's unknown, and even though unknown can be scary, but I always assess the risk first. I'm not a huge risk taker. I am not a double mortgage my house person. I'm like, this is where my children live. I want it to be stable and comfortable. So you don't have to be that type of a person to try something new. You can, and it's kind of the same as taking those smaller risks, and then just try and see if you can get a yes. And then when you get a yes, you just work to the next yes. And if the risk is too big, like if the risk is like you're going to lose your home and you're like, that would be terrible, then find a smaller risk, like just pare it down a little bit to the step before that and take that step. And then eventually those steps really do add up into something fun and new and exciting, and have curiosity. I think you have to be really curious about whatever you're trying to solve.
Curious-based question asking, assumption-based question asking too. All right, I'm going to stop record. So if you're watching this recording, you're going to wonder what we talk about next, but don't go anywhere, Allie. And thank you so much for your time.